So, going back to the topic of psychoanalysis, is that the right term
Yeah.
here? Okay.
So psychoanalysis covers at least three groups of people, and some would say a lot more than that. But most people think of Freud when they think of psychoanalysis, and as the father of psychoanalysis. A lot of people know about Carl Jung, who was associated with Freud in the beginning and then split off on his own. And then there's Adler, and there are still different schools still practicing this kind of therapy.
And Daniel, the character in the book, is a Jungian. How would you describe Daniel as a psychoanalyst?
Uh, a reluctant Jungian, maybe you would say, because he's a psychiatrist. He has a very medical bias. And I think, like a lot of analysts, his whole experience is defined by his own analysis. So the way that he tends to practice is the way that when he was the patient and his analyst, he had two analysts, how they dealt with him, he sort of just continues that way. So he's very, I mean, so the way Jungians practice in general, that there's a lot about dreams. There's stuff about dreams in the book. There's the famous Jungian sandtray. You know what a sandtray is?
A tray of sand, I suppose.
Well, it's a tray. Yeah, it's a little like you see the little Japanese Buddhist sand gardens, but what's different with the Jungian sandtray is that in general there's a collection of little figurines that can represent anything. I mean, animals, mythological figures, children's toys, and they're usually, the analyst has a shelf full of these figures, and then you choose and you put them in the sand yourself. And what happens is, on that blank screen of the sand, a story develops, a series of images, and then the analyst generally interprets that or helps the patient have some understanding of what is happening in the tray. And it's not just for children. A lot of people think of that, although it's used extensively with children. It's used a lot with adults, because that's how we reach into our own play space, which is something that is hard for adults to do sometimes.
Symbols are still important no matter how old you are, who you are. And Jung deals with symbols a lot. And I can imagine that the sand tray is another example of those symbols. But in your book, in Healing Lily, what are some of the important symbols that kind of come up in the book?
And I didn't start off, but a lot of the symbols have to do with the Secret Garden, Frances Hodgins Burnett's Secret Garden, which was a 1909 children's story that is essentially a fairy tale. So that the Secret Garden is one of the biggest images that comes up. I mean, I think it's a very appealing image, right? This idea that there's something hidden, and the Secret Garden images of the old stone wall and the moss and the ivy, but behind that there's something very special. But it's also an image of a dead garden, because that's how the Secret Garden begins. No one's been there in 10 years, nothing is growing, and yet it comes alive.
Healing Lily, a Novel of Hope, by D. Stephenson Bond. Published by Alternative Views Publishing, copyright 2010.